Welcome, everyone. My name is Kristen Taylor. I'm the Assistant Director of the Texas Southern University Thurgood Marshall School of Law's Office of Career, Professional Development, and Diversity Initiatives. And I'm happy to bring this program to you this evening on large law firms. We are fortunate to have three panelists with us for tonight's program, and I'm going to do a brief introduction, and then we'll get into our talking points. First, we have Rikiya Thomas. Rikiya is a TMSL alum from the class of 2008. She's currently a partner at Porter Hedges here in Houston. We also have Reggie Wilson. Reggie's a member of the class of 2015 at Thurgood Law. He's a senior associate at Norton Fulbright, also here in Houston. And we have Sonia Merrikh. Sonia is a current 2L student. She'll be a member of the class of 2023, and she is a former summer associate at Husch, Blackwell. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for attending this evening. We're going to kind of go over what it's like to work in a large law firm and what are some of the desirable characteristics that one might possess. What are some of the opportunities that students may have to work in a large law firm, and maybe some advice or pitfalls that they should try to avoid. At the end of the meeting, we're also going to open it up for questions. So feel free to ask your questions in the chat, or if you'd like to use the raise hand feature, we're happy to let you speak to the panelists directly. So let's get started. I guess we can start with Rikiya. Would you mind telling us a little bit about your background, your law school experience, and how you ended up at Porter Hedges?
Sure. So without being long-winded, I am 2008 grad. My undergraduate degree was in business. I graduated early, moved home to Florida, worked for a year before applying to law school. And I just said, you know what, I'm going to be a personal injury attorney. I know a personal injury attorney. That's why I'm going to law school. That's what I wrote about in my personal statement. And then I arrived at Thurgood, and after my first semester, I didn't know if I was going to make it to be an attorney, nonetheless, a personal injury attorney. But after my first year, I did relatively well, and I sent out my resumes. At the time, we weren't doing it by email. We were actually sending out resumes on really nice paper. I spent a lot of money on that. And I sent my resume and cover letter to pretty much every firm in Houston and firms in the Tampa Bay area. And I also kind of broadened my search to public defenders' offices and DA's offices in Florida. And it only took one. And luckily, I saved some money that summer because I moved home, and I had my 1L, I spent my 1L summer at the public defender's office in my hometown of Sarasota, Florida. And so I did have a 1L clerkship, which was great, but it wasn't in a large law firm, which was fine because I found the experience to be invaluable. And it was definitely a talking point during my interviews for my 2L year, because everybody was like, how was it, working at the public defender's office? Like, what kind of cases did you work on? And so I went into my 2L year, I went through the OCI process, and I clerked at, two large law firms, one of which I started my legal career after graduation. I've lateral to a few other large law firms with a partner that I worked for many years in a practice group. And I lateraled over to Porter Hedges about 2.5 years ago. And I am currently a partner. My practice area is corporate law, so I'm a transactional lawyer. I do not go to court. I sit in my office, and that is a little bit about me without being long-winded. So that's kind of my background that I got here.
Yes, thank you. We'll get more into it as the meeting goes on. Reggie, please give us a little bit about your background and how you got to Norton Rose.
Yeah, sure. Again, Reggie Wilson, class of Thurgood Marshall School of Law, class of 2015. A lot like Rikiya, I took a break between my undergrad degrees in business, and I took a break between undergrad and law school, it was about a 3-year break when I went out and worked. So I was a non-traditional student when I came into law school. My first year, again, just like Ricky, I thought I was going into labor and employment. I did everything to prepare myself for labor and employment. I was litigation, full speed ahead. I'm very extroverted. I love being around people. I get energy from being around people. Obviously, you have these misconceptions of transactional lawyers being a little more introverted and litigation lawyers being a lot more extroverted, but that is not the case whatsoever. Between my first year and second year, I clerked for a federal judge and for a boutique law firm here in Houston that focused on labor and employment. 2L year, I ended up doing very well my first year. And at the beginning of my 2L year, doing on-campus interviews, I was able to interview with a number of firms. And I ended up accepting an offer from Fulbright, ExxonMobil, and Coates Rose. So between my 2L year and 3L year, I actually split between 3 firms, well, 2 firms and a corporation. I would never recommend doing that ever to anyone. That was a terrible decision. By the end of the summer, I was completely burned out going into my 2L year, but I will say that I did gain a lot of valuable experience. The reason why, and I could say now I'm in public finance. So the reason why I took this route is because about a month before my summer intern started between my 2 and 3L year, I was told that I was strategically placed next to the head of public finance for Norton Fulbright during a dinner. And I remember turning to him and him telling me, "We're hiring, we have a major need. We've been told that you're a good guy that could fill this position." And I said to him, "Hey, best of luck. I hope you find someone." Because that's how that, and again, lawsuit students, please don't do this. But that's how much and how invested I was in litigation. But I can tell you by the end of that dinner, he completely sold me on the public finance practice. So I rotated through labor and employment and public finance at Fulbright, and I ultimately accepted the public finance offer. I'll get into a little more of the nuts and bolts as we go on throughout the night, because I like Ricky, I can hold this all day. So I'll stop now.
All right, well, thank you. Just to touch on the law school experience briefly, do you feel like there were any classes or clinics or social organizations that you participated in at Thurgood that would have helped you prepare for your time as a summer associate or your time as an associate or partner in big law? And we hear about law review, we hear about mock trial, moot court, or maybe some of the other affinity organizations like, BALSA, or anything in particular that stands out to you, or class?
For me, it's law review, moot court, mock trial. That's something that I'm on the recruiting committee at my firm, and that's something that we look at. I was on law review at Thurgood. It's still one of those, hot ticket items, I guess, for resumes, just to stand out. That's not to say that you have to do law review or mock trial or moot court to get a job in big law. That's definitely not the case. But it definitely kind of sets you apart.
Yeah, I'm on the hiring committee for Fulbright as well. And some of the things that set you apart are law review, mock trial, and moot court, and specifically how you can relate those experiences to what you believe you can provide in a law firm. I will say to each one of you that, and I may be jumping ahead now, but if I would have known what I know now then, I would focus a lot more on my practice area with the elective classes. There was one class that I took, and I was told all throughout law school it was the quote unquote easy A, but that ended up being the class, local government ended up being the class that I used every single day of my practice. So I will tell you this: if you have a certain niche area and there are some classes that you can take, so I would 100% after you take those 4 classes recommend that you get exposure to it, in addition to your internship experiences. Knowing the foundational language once you go into the practice of law only help you along that much. It's a learning experience. equipped with all the tools there at Thurgood. So I would say make sure you align, if you know what you want to do, make sure you're aligning your elective classes and your organizations with you after you graduate law school.
Right, very helpful. I've heard also from some attorneys who focus on transactional matters that students should be sure to take commercial transaction classes and any classes that expose them to drafting contracts. So I don't know what Thurgood currently offers, but I've heard that that's helpful.
Right. I think that's and it was when I was there, a required course. So you have contracts, commercial, just secure transactions, commercial paper. What else? I mean, your legal writing and research classes, those are important. As a transactional lawyer, you need to know how to read and write still, you know, even if you're in transactional practice. I think those are the key ones. And I, you know, I advise everyone to take advantage of the elective classes. If you're going to do transactional work, you know, the only class that I dropped at Thurgood was taxation. I literally dropped that class. In hindsight, I wish I had have taken it just so I have a working knowledge. Of course, I developed that, you know, over the years of practicing and doing M&A deals, but, you know, it would have been nice to have have a working knowledge of it when I started practicing. So be mindful of that. Tax, don't avoid it. Don't avoid that tax elective class.
Super helpful. So Reggie, I'm going to toss this question to you. Tell us more about who your clients are, what a typical day, if you can describe a typical day in the office looks like.
Sure. So again, I'm in public finance. So my clients are governmental entities such as state agencies for the state of Texas, Harris County, City of Houston, a lot of local governments. So we're on the public side of things. We act as general counsel for them. So similar to like a city attorney for local governments. And I'm general counsel for 12 local governments around the Houston area. My general day is hard because it varies. That's a very hard question to address because it varies every single day. I can say I live and die by my calendar. So the night before and the morning of, I take a look at my calendar to see what's going on. I'll generally speak that I'm on and off of conference calls. On behalf of my clients, I'm negotiating with financial institutions, your banks. We do a lot of municipal bond work and bond financings. So it's issuing debt to financial institutions. But my day varies so much. I can say that I'm pre-COVID, that is, I'm not in my office all day, every day. Our practice requires us to get out, to attend these meetings, to go to events. It's very politically involved, which is awkward because one of the things that you hear never to talk about is like politics, religion, etc. These are things that we literally talk about every single day. How COVID has affected us, how local governments can and cannot meet, whether it's in person or virtually. So these are some of the challenges that we've been dealing with more recently, but my day varies a lot day to day.
And just for the benefit of anybody on the call who isn't aware of some of the unique things or unique aspects of a large law firm practice, can you explain how there are not many individual personal clients, but instead more business or corporate clients? And that could be one for Ricky or for Reggie.
So my practice is different. I'm in a very niche practice. So for us, it is more so personal clients. I'm talking about the governmental entity itself. It's not going to be individuals. Large law firms very rarely represent individuals unless you see someone that's super high net worth, right? That's not so much the best business print and plan for us to follow. But I will say that we do have more so like institutional clients that we cater to. Of course, we're always out trying to achieve and get new business. But a lot of the clients that we do are the ones that you see on your, top Fortune 100, Fortune 150, Fortune 500 companies. That's the work that we're doing a lot or that's the clientele that we focus on a lot. And I'll say this, generally speaking, most of your large law firms do focus on and share a lot of the same clients. It's about how much work you can get from that particular client.
Yeah, there's definitely an aspect of competition between firms on who's going to land, the big fish clients. So, Ricky, I'm going to pivot over to you. Maybe tell us a little bit about your typical day, who your clients are, and what makes Porter Hedges or your role at Porter Hedges unique.
So my typical day is very similar to Reggie's. It varies from day to day. It's in my role as a partner now, it's more administrative work, but it's also managing, your younger associates and training your younger associates as well, managing, client expectations, a lot of just conference calls and negotiations. In a good season, a good transactional season, I may have 4 or 5 deals that I'm managing at a time, and it varies. When the pandemic first hit, it's like 6 weeks of my time that I didn't have anything to do. I mean, I did a lot of do-it-yourself projects around the house because clients were like, we don't know what we want to do. We're just sitting on the money. We're just going to wait it out. And, third quarter and fourth quarter of 2020 was probably two of the busiest quarters I have had in my legal career. I couldn't believe it. So it varies. As far as my clients, over the course of my career, it's been, your Fortune 500 companies, but we also represent a fair number of high wealth individuals and serial entrepreneurs as well.
And are either of you currently responsible to bill your time? And if so, can you talk about that a little bit? I see a big smile on Reggie's face. He's like, I don't know that students are familiar with billing. So I think that's something that maybe we should introduce to them or explain a little bit.
You will learn to live your life like a quarter.
0.1. 0.2.
No,
1/10 of an hour, right? 1/10 of an hour.
Yeah. So this, what you'll hear a lot about is big law firms or large law firms and the billable hour. And to be honest with you, when you practice law, you're always billing an hour. Whether you're solo, I'll say that always, but as prosecutors, there's some areas where you're not. But even solo practitioners are billing hours. Large law firms typically, at least from an associate standpoint, have certain hour requirements for their associates to bill. And there's a difference between working an 8-hour day and then billing an 8-hour day. Working an 8-hour day just means that you were at work for 8 hours. Billing an 8-hour day means that you are actually charging time to a client on a client matter that you may be addressing. So you may have to work a 12-hour day to bill an 8-hour day. But also you may only have to work an 8-hour day to bill an 8-hour day. There are ups and downs and highs and lows. There are going to be busy times, like Ricky said, where you're billing, a crazy amount of hours. And there's going to be a lot of downtime where you have free time to DIY your house and travel and do things that you like to do outside of practicing law. So I will say that billing is at least, I say it at Norton was Fulbright, but I've spoken with peers and friends at other firms. It's a major push. Law firms, that's how they recruit their revenues. That's how they get their revenues and then bills out to their clients. So it's pushed weekly, if not almost daily, to make sure that associates, partners, counsel, they're getting their time in so that they can bill that to the client. Because one thing that you don't want to do, for instance, say you work this month in September, you forget to release your time. A partner sends the bill in to a client, and then you release that time in October. Well, now the partner has to make a decision either to write that time off, which means not bill it to the client, or have a very serious discussion, one-on-one discussion with you, which you really want to stay out of those type of situations.
That's super helpful. And then I have a question in the chat actually for Ricky, asking whether your billing requirements changed when you moved from an associate to a partner. Did they increase, decrease, change, and in what way?
They decrease, but I have more I have a different type of responsibility. So I understand why they decrease. Like when I saw the decrease, I was like, okay, I can do that. But I have more on my plate now that I can't bill for. So it kind of evens itself out.
It's a good trade-off.
Yeah.
I want to kind of transition the conversation to the summer associate and the internship process so that we can get Sonia involved. But before we do that, since Ricky and Reggie both mentioned that you are on the hiring committee, would you mind maybe sharing with the students on the call a few traits or some kind of anecdote that you definitely, or some kind of characteristic that you look for when you're recruiting summer associates?
So the first thing we're going to look for, just off the top, is the GPA and the grades. There's really no way around that. So, you know, take law school very seriously. Your grades matter. They will follow you your entire career, unfortunately. Do really well. You guys, you're in your first semester of law school. Take it seriously. Like, it's a profession, but you can't get around the grades. The extracurriculars in law review, moot court, mock trial, that stands out. The second or the third thing we're going to look at, and I speak for myself, you know, if you're submitting a resume and a cover letter to a law firm, make sure you don't have typos. Take the extra step if you're sending it to somebody at a law firm to find out their name. Go on the website, find out the name of the recruiting manager or the hiring partner and address them personally. Do not use mail merge. Like, it takes time. And guess what, guys? I did it myself. Like, I was in your shoes in 2006. I did it. And it takes a lot of time, but you will reap the benefits if you do it right. So make sure that, you know, some firms require you to submit a writing sample, make sure there's no typos in that, and have someone look over your resume to provide the best work product possible. You know, talk to someone in career services. You may have, you know, prior work experience that really needs to be highlighted on your resume. So talk to somebody about that. But first and foremost, it's going to be the GPA.
110% agree with literally every single thing she said. I want to go back really quick, Kristen, if I could.
Yes, absolutely.
Was about law school experiences. Another thing that I want to talk to you about is the non-traditional way to get into big law. That's the aspirations that you have, and that's networking. Make sure you network with any and everyone you can throughout law school, and that's whether you're a 1L, 2L, 3L. Go up a class, go down a class. You don't know who will be in a position to help you. You don't know who you will be in a position to help. I can say that I secured my first internship with a federal judge because of my relationship with my LP professor. And federal clerkships are very, very difficult to secure. And there's also something that stands out on the resume when you're talking about big firms, because we understand how difficult it is to secure those.
Yep.
So make sure you network. Talk to any and everybody. Like I said, my first firm client that I brought in was actually one of my 2015 classmates. She was in a position to give me work to bring in work as a second-year associate at Norton Fulbright, which made me look even better. And the reason she did is because she remembered how I was in law school and how I treated people and the focus and determination that I had throughout law school. So just make sure your network. It's not all, for the most part, it's your grades, but there are some back routes that you can get into big law as well. So kind of jumping forward to this, to the summer clerkship program. Again, I agree with Ricky said. One of the things that I like personally when I'm interviewing a student is two things really that stand out to me. Number one, displaying firm knowledge, going really deep on the firm, picking out an aspect, asking about it, whether it's a diversity initiative, whether it's a certain major case or transaction, literally asking about those. And then also what even more stands out to me is once an interviewee becomes an interviewer, make sure that you're putting yourself in a prime situation to go into a firm or a career that you love, right? Because just as much as you want to be, or just as much as we want you there, we want you to want to be there as well. And you demonstrate that by asking the appropriate questions. Every firm has a culture, and every firm's culture is different. So you want to make sure you're asking questions to understand whether the firm's culture matches up with who you are as a person. Is it a little too buttoned up? Is it a little too loose? Are they not organized enough? Do they have the practice areas that you're interested in? These are things that you want to get out of the interviews, right? And I think that becoming the interviewer, there's nothing wrong with that, and asking very direct questions to make sure it's a fit. So those type of candidates stand out to me the most when you walk in with confidence. Another thing that I'll say, and this is the last thing, when you're a summer associate and you hear these stigmas about Thurgood Marshall, I want you to know you're more than enough. You're there for a reason. We looked at your resumes, we looked at your cover letters, writing samples. Now you're in the interview. Now you're going through the interview process. So you're just as good as that person from Stanford or Harvard. Just make sure you are walking in with confidence instead of any stigmas that you may have heard that are not true when you actually get into the legal world.
Right. Very, very helpful. And just, I'll maybe make the statement from the Career Services Office perspective. I won't be speaking on behalf of Porter Hedges or Norton Rose, but in general, we hear from employers in big law that they're looking to recruit students from the top 10% of the class. So if there's 200 students in the class, in your incoming class, you would need to be ranked number 1 through number 20 in order to be considered in the top 10% of class rank. So GPA and class rank typically is a barrier to entry in big law, but once you get in the door, just like Ricky and Reggie said, you guys need to sell yourself, be confident, and definitely highlight your assets. So Sonia, we're going to introduce you into the conversation. You're a current student and just finished your summer with Husch Blackwell. So tell us a little bit about how you got that experience and what steps you took your 1L year to secure that position.
Yeah, so for me, I worked very, very closely with OCPD during my 1L year. So meeting with Nikki and Kristen helped me a lot. I know coming in, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know what area of law I was even interested in. And I actually attended this OCPD event my 1L year for big law, and that's what caught my interest, attending these panels and learning the different areas of law. So just by being here, you guys are doing a really big step towards your career in law. And so again, like both Ricky and Reggie said, grades are very important. My 1L year, I really focused on my grades and only that. I didn't really join any organizations or be active within the student body until my 2L year. And so because of that, I spent my entire winter break applying for positions, and I came about my position through OCPD, and it was a specific program called Move the Needle. And so this was like a diversity pipeline program, which was a really amazing experience where I got to split my summer, both with a big law firm like Husch Blackwell and then in-house with Conagra, which was a big company that was headquartered in Chicago. And so during my summer, in my case with this program, the in-house company and the big law that I was working with were connected together. So I got to spend a full 10 weeks with Husch Blackwell while also serving with in-house with Conagra, which was one of their clients. And so that was a really great experience to see both sides of the big law aspect and the in-house aspect. And that was all because I stayed connected with OCPD. I was constantly sending my resumes, my cover letters to Kristen and Nikki and having them review it for me. And just like Reggie and Ricky said, having errors or any type of like mistake in your cover letter, it's going to be a big disqualification for you. So make sure that you're working closely with OCPD for that.
Well, thank you so much for the endorsement. You know, I appreciate it. And yes, to your point and to Ricky and Reggie's point also, even if you can't have your OCPD counselor review your materials, run it past an upperclassman, run it past your classmates, ask your professor to take a look at it. Sometimes I think students or even professionals rely on spell check to catch all of your errors, but spell check will not highlight if you use the word trail instead of trial. It won't catch things like that. You have to read things out loud and look at it with a careful eye. So definitely take advantage of the opportunity to proofread your documents and have someone else proofread them for you so that you don't waste an opportunity, by making a simple mistake. Were your summer
Let me just
opportunities?
add
Oh,
something
sure.
on that. I know you mentioned if career services can't look at it or upperclassmen, take the step to reach out to one of us, me or Reggie or someone. I mean, do it. I get resumes and I have literally printed them out, sent a hand markup, and had a conversation with people. Like, we actually care and want you guys to succeed. Like, we graduated from the same law school. So reach out. Like, people are available. That, of course, you're going to have some that won't respond. But if you can't find anybody to do it, feel free to reach out to me. I'm not going to speak for Reggie, but reach out to me, send me a resume. I'll look at it, make sure it's done right, because we want to make sure that you guys get jobs.
Because I guess I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I have to really impart this upon you guys. Literally, firms are choosing from hundreds of students and candidates, and classes are getting smaller. They're not getting bigger when it comes to the law. As you all know, or maybe you don't know, but salaries and positions are increasing for associates. Billable rates are increasing for clients because of that. So the days of 40 plus, 50 plus summer associates, it's starting to dwindle a bit. I mean, I remember my class, and this was just in 2015 now, my 2015 class in Houston alone had 50 summer associates. Our typical class right now is somewhere hovering around 15 to 20 per summer. So it's very competitive, and there are people that are on the hiring committee that look for minute things to X a candidate out because we received so many great candidates and so many great resumes. So it's very, very important that you get a second and third pair of eyes on those documents. And like Ricky said, we are available. Do not be scared to reach out to us. Many a time in a year, I just threw a dart in the dark and started reaching out to any and everyone at large law firms that had Thurgood, because most large law firms, you can separate attorneys by the school they attended. So that's something that I would recommend if big law is your path or where you would like to go to utilize.
Yes, very, very helpful. I have not yet met a Thurgood alum who isn't willing to talk to a current Thurgood student. The only thing is just trying to negotiate, the proper time. But I think I can speak for most Black lawyers or most diverse lawyers. Anytime they have an opportunity to give back to their school or to, a student who's underrepresented in the profession, we're happy to do it. So don't be afraid. Don't let the fact that you may get a no persuade you from asking the question. And Ricky and Reggie have included their emails in the chat for anyone that's interested. So Sonia, back to you. Was your experience remote or in person, and how do you think that affected your ability to learn this summer and gain experience?
I had a hybrid system with Husch where we would come in maybe 2 to 3 times a day out of the week, and then the other days we'd be online. And so it was a little bit more difficult in that way, where a lot of attorneys weren't coming into the office during the pandemic because of what was going on with the situation. So it did hinder a little bit of connecting with other attorneys and being able to connect with everyone through that. But again, it was just about taking initiative and reaching out over Zoom calls and having coffee breaks over Zoom. And then the attorneys that did come into the office, you would go to their office and speak to them, grab lunch with them. And so it worked out in the end. It was a really positive outcome at the end where we were able to connect with everyone still, despite being in a hybrid situation.
Wonderful. And what are some of the projects or assignments that you contributed to this summer?
So I worked very heavy within the litigation side of the department of the team. So I worked closely with any new projects that was going on. So it was nothing that, it wasn't busy work or work that they had prepared for us to work on. It was projects that were pending right now at the moment. And one of the one of the highlights of a project I worked on was something related to COVID-19. And so there was a case going on where we were actively working towards helping the Dallas community and their prisoners that are facilitated. So they had the summer associates prepping for trial, attending depositions, and we were engaged in all the same things that the attorneys were engaged in as well.
That sounds super exciting. And it seems like you got a lot of real life experience. How many summer associates were working with you last year?
So we had a very small class. It was just 4 summers total.
And then were you the only student working at Conagra as well?
Yes.
Okay. Wonderful. What would you say is maybe your most challenging experience as a 1L summer associate, and what was your most favorable experience?
I think the most challenging was coming in and thinking that I wasn't as smart as everybody else that was there. I think all the other summers came from very high ranked schools. And so coming in, I already felt like an imposter syndrome where maybe I don't belong, and I just got lucky that I'm here. And so that was something I was battling my entire experience there. I was there for about 10 weeks. And so it was just a constant reminding myself that I'm here because I was chosen to be here. And so once I got out of my head about that, it was much easier to really connect with everyone there. Coming from like a first generation, I was the only student there that was a first generation student. I was the only student of color. And so it was a really different dynamic for me. But I think the firm on making me feel like I belonged and trying to accommodate towards me and helping me connect with everyone. And so it was a great experience through that and overcoming that. And so that was the challenging part. But my favorite aspect was actually being able to come into the office and meet the attorneys there. For me, seeing women in very high positions was something that was very empowering to see. At Husch Blackwell, all of the partners were female, and they were women that were very, very driven and strong. And so it was a great experience to be able to see how much they cared to talk to us as summers, and we were able to work on projects with the partners there. And so it was a really great experience just seeing that initiative that was going on at the firm.
I wonder if Ricky or Reggie wants to contribute any information about imposter syndrome, because even though the students, so Sonia, has mentioned that she faced that as summer associate. Have you guys still, or are you still having any feelings about imposter syndrome, even as a practicing attorney or one that's been out for, 10, 15 years? Are there situations where you face imposter syndrome?
A little bit less now than when I first started. I say a little bit, a lot less now than when I first started. When I came into the practice, it was a lot of, I guess I was unsettled, and I was worried about every little thing that I couldn't necessarily control, which kind of forced me to step outside of my own personality and put on that imposter or that face covering, that mask. I will say this kind of goes back to what I said when you're interviewing and looking for jobs and you realize that every place has its own culture. Make sure, and me recommending that you become an interviewer. Obviously, you can only get so much from an interview because everybody's the best, everybody's special, and you should come to us because we're better than everyone. But at the end of the day, really pay attention to what they're saying. Make sure you reach out to people that are within that organization or firm to have one-on-one conversations if you have an offer on the table to make sure that it fits your personality, and that helps with the imposter syndrome. I mean, there are a lot of times that you walk in a room and I'm only me. I remember the very first meeting that I went to for Norton Fulbright. There was over 200 people in a room, and I was literally the only African American inside the entire room. So you get comfortable being uncomfortable, and you come into yourself, and the more that you learn about your field and the more that you become an expert, the more that you're going to be comfortable and start speaking up and start to really allow your presence to be felt, so that you get to a point where you're like a Ricky, you walk into the room and you command the room just by your presence. Also because everybody knows that you know your stuff, and they're going to lean to you for your knowledge and your legal counseling. But yes, in short, yes, it happens sometimes.
I think the best way to combat imposter syndrome is to over prepare, right? So, and I kind of use that same model in law school, right? Like you're getting ready to take a test and you're like, I don't know, I don't want to say overstudy because there is such thing as overstudy, but I over prepared. So I knew what to expect, right? And I think that's the same thing in the practice of law. When you start, there's so many things you just don't know. And so I use the weekends to like read materials and learn more about transactional law and M&A and just learning things so that when it became my time to speak up, I knew what I was talking about. And that kind of eases the fear of, I don't belong here. As far as me on a day-to-day basis, I mean, I'm a corporate transactional partner in Houston, Texas. I don't see many people that look like me on a regular basis, but I am comfortable in my skill set where it doesn't matter anymore.
Right. So it's something that we deal with throughout our careers, but the pressure gets less the further along you get. So, but I appreciate everybody's candor on that. Does anybody have any final thoughts before we open it up to Q&A? I think we've kind of covered the process from application to classes that you should take in law school, organizations that you might want to be involved in, how to find the big law opportunities. We've talked about a typical summer associate experience. Any final thoughts from our panelists? I'm going to open it up to the attendees. If anybody wants to ask a question, please go ahead and raise your hand or just unmute, or you can put your question in the chat.
Yeah, not to speak for everyone, but I for the next couple of minutes or however long we have left, I'd like to make this a lot more interactive. Where you're not just listening to us talk. I remember sitting, well, not your chairs, but I remember sitting there and listening to people speak at me, and there's like some of it stuck, a lot of it because you're getting so much information. Some of you are 1Ls in your first semester. It's going in one year. You may not be retaining it because you have a lot of other things going on. So I would like this to be a lot more interactive. If you have questions, let's have a chat, let's have a conversation, and let's utilize this time.
Yep. So the students on the call, you have a partner at Porter Hedges, you have a senior associate at Norton Rose, and a current student who are working in big law. So this is your opportunity to introduce yourself, tell them who you are, what you're interested in, and maybe ask a question. So I see that we have a couple people. Christina, go ahead.
Hi, I just have a quick question. What would you recommend doing during your 2L year to help you stand out? I know you guys spoke about moot court and also law review, but I noticed majority of, that we can only do our 3L year. So what would you recommend us do during our time of being a 2L?
I thought you participated in law review your second and third year, yeah. Christina. I think it's your 2L year and your third year. So I think you do the write-on competition after your 1L year, and then you join law review or moot court first semester of your second year.
Okay.
Another thing that would expose you to some experience is Thurgood has a couple of law clinics. I'm not quite sure what area of law that you're specifically interested in, but that's something that you may want to also take a look into, because you get some real world experience working under the type of kind of shadowing a practicing attorney, and I think that experience is invaluable. In addition to that, what you typically see is the 2L year is more challenging than the 1L year, not necessarily because the work becomes harder, but because the extracurriculars then start to pop up, the student organizations. I think, Christina, another way that you can maximize this is attend your local affiliate events once they open up. Bar Association and the Houston Young Lawyers Association, and both of those associations have their own websites, and they have events throughout the year, virtually and in person. And I think that's another opportunity for you to network So that way, when you're sitting in an interview, you might come across a familiar face, or even if someone takes a liking to you, they can recommend you and really. So I think 2L years more so about mixing and mingling to set up your future career after law school.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Christina.
And also, you know, don't shy away from unpaid internships. I know it's not that glamorous, but I did one myself. I interned with the First Court of Appeals, and I did it really just to rule out that I did not want to do a federal clerkship. I did not enjoy I enjoyed the judge. He was a fabulous man, but I did not enjoy the type of work that, you know, I would have in hindsight been doing had I have applied for a federal clerkship. So, you know, use those unpaid internships as well to kind of do a process of elimination to say, this is not an area of practice that I want to do for the rest of my life.
Thank you.
Okay. And I have some hands raised. I'm just going to go according to the order on my screen. Is it Darelis Ortez Vega?
Yes, that's me. Hi. First of all, I'm so sorry. I'm on my way home. I have a long commute and I'm stuck in traffic, but I just wanted to ask.
Are you hands-free? Is your phone?
Yeah.
Okay. I was going to say, yeah, okay. Go ahead.
I'm currently in the drive-through. So needless to say, I'm on. I just wanted to ask, I guess, I've heard a lot of misconceptions, what I feel are misconceptions now listening to the panel, the wonderful panel that we have currently speaking, in regards to what it feels like or what it is like to work in a large firm. I've been told that you get lost, like you don't have, like you lose your identity, like there's so many people, like you get lost in the shuffles, and it's very impersonal. So I just want to know if you guys feel like that is accurate or what your experience is like. And then if you've had any experience working in a small firm and what it feels like to work in a small firm versus working in a large firm, in terms of, I guess, community and just having people there with you to support you and build you up.
Go ahead.
So all large law firms are not created equally. Every firm has its own culture, and I think we often forget that. I do not have the experience of working at a smaller firm, but I do have the experience of working at several large law firms here in Houston, and the culture is different. And certain cultures work for certain people. Certain people don't want to be social, right? They just want to go into work and do their work and bill their hours. And others are looking for a community. So that's something that you definitely need to ask questions when you're in your interviewing process of these different firms to talk about culture. And, you know, let me just backtrack to the interviewing process. Once you're there, normally it's a full day or half a day of interviews. So you're interviewing with 8, 10, 12 attorneys. Ask each attorney that same question, like, what do you think about the culture? To see if you get the same response. But to answer your question, all firms are not created equal, and it just depends on, you know, what firm you land in.
Yeah, I would have to piggyback off that and say 110%. At Fulbright, we have a very close group. There's always open door policy, whether it's our partners or senior associates to the junior associates. I'm not going to sell our firm, but I will say that we have a really good culture. With that being said, I echo again what Ricky said. When you're interviewing, make sure you're asking these questions to make sure that it fits your personality and what you want to do. Once you get into these large law firms, I've never experienced an associate getting lost unless they wanted to get lost, because all of these large law firms have a lot of committees for associates. And that's one way for you to get involved and get your name out there, even in groups, practice areas that you're not specifically involved in. have very good working relationships. I'm not a litigator. I'm on the transactional side of things. But the litigators know who I am based on the committee work that I've done. For instance, the hiring committee, and then we have a non-partner associates committee where I chair. So get involved with the firm committees, and that allows you to meet a lot of people. Like I said, I've never seen an associate get lost in the numbers unless that particular associate was shying away from either work or getting involved with associate committees.
And I can add to that. For me, it's during my interview processes, I really understood the firm's culture much better after going through 8 to 10 attorneys that I spoke with. So like by the time you get to the end of the interview process, you can really have at least a foundational understanding of what the culture is like, what the people are like, and that would show you exactly if you felt like you matched with them or not. But I felt like after every interview, I understood what the firm was about, what the people were about, and if I would fit in or not. So those interviews help.
And I will say, so I haven't worked at another post-grad, I haven't worked at a smaller firm, but I did intern with 2 smaller firms. And for me specifically, it was about structure and organization, and even more than that, the resources that a large firm allows you. You hear about 6 degrees of separation. I've literally seen 1 to 2 degrees of separation for some top ranking officials on the federal side of things that all I had to do is make 1 call and you were able to get in touch with him or her. And that's not the case at every single firm that you're with. So for me, what set a large firm apart from a boutique firm or a regional size firm was the resources and the reach that the firm has.
Thank you guys so much for your answers and for your time.
Thank you. David Fajardo, go ahead and unmute and ask your question, please.
Hi, my name is David Fajardo. I'm a 1L in my first semester, and I guess I have a sort of a 2-part question. From what I understand, the application process begins during our Christmas break. And so my question is, do you find that, I know you can't speak for other big firms, but do you find that you guys as firms hire 1Ls for the summer going into 2L's school year? And also as a 1L, I'm not sure that I have much to set myself apart from other 1Ls because I've only been in school for a month and a half. So how do you guys recommend doing that?
But you do have things that set yourself apart, and that's past experiences. And those are the things that Ricky mentioned earlier, where you reach out to your career services and you have the likes of Kristen and her team to help you cultivate that and put that in wording to really sell yourself and push your experience and how it relates to the firm. I think that's another thing. Like, don't look at it as I'm a 1L, I don't have legal experience, so it's going to be hard for me to get in there. That's not true. You do have a background, and even if you're not, or if you didn't take, or if you haven't been, started a career and come back, you still have experiences. Whether you were on the honor roll, or you were the president of at your school, or whatever it may be, how that relates to the legal field and push your selling points. So don't undercut yourself, David, and say, hey, I'm a 1L. With that being said, my firm does hire 1Ls. Our last class we had, for the Houston office only, we had 24 associates, and 11 of those associates were 1Ls. And I can also say that 2 of those 1Ls were Thurgood students. So don't discount yourself. Definitely apply.
Okay.
And if I could just add something big, am I unmuted? No. Okay. If I could just add something, around the winter break time, you'll hear from our office about 1L recruiting programs. Some of those will be through the Houston Bar Association's Diversity Summer Clerkship Program. And then a lot of large law firms have special 1L diversity recruiting programs that they advertise on their websites. And then going into the summer between your 1L year and your 2L year is when you'll have the opportunity to participate in OCI, which is our on-campus interview program. And that's typically where I think Big Law recruits most of their summer associates, through the OCI program. So long story short, just stay tuned to messaging and emails from the OCPD about these hiring opportunities when they come up.
Kristen, do we have any 2Ls on?
Two L's only for, or 2 L's and 3 L's for OCI. There's an ABA.
Don't be scared to go up to Dallas to their Sunbelt minority.
Yes.
Don't be scared to go out to Atlanta to the SimJet.
Yep.
Go any and everywhere, cast a very wide net. And even though you're going and you're interviewing in Atlanta, that doesn't mean that you're going to work in Atlanta.
Right.
For instance, my firm, and I'm sure Ricky firms, goes to these minority job fairs and they're interviewing for all offices. So you may not secure that OCI position here in Houston. That's okay. That's not your own swing of the ball. You still have Sunbelt in Dallas. You still have SimJet in Atlanta. So again, it's about doing the work, putting in the time. It can get a little frustrating at times, but it benefits you.
Yeah, cast a broad net. So to Reggie's point, the schools typically will come to Thurgood, even in a virtual capacity, for OCI, but there are also always opportunities to meet with these law firms at the recruiting conferences, which happen in the summertime, the ones that he mentioned, SimJet and Sunbelt. And then you can always apply through the firm website directly. We hear from students all the time, well, I saw something on the website, but it's not on Simplicity. Should I apply? Absolutely. Absolutely apply. Take advantage of any opportunity that you see, but just make sure that you're prepared and that you're submitting, the best error-proof, most persuasive documents that you can when you submit your application materials. Did we answer your question, David?
Yes, again, I appreciate you guys' time. It's been very informative.
Thank you. Okay, Cian Jimenez.
Hi. I wanted to ask, I know Reginald, you've mentioned a lot about culture, or both of you have mentioned about how different big law firms have different cultures, and asking questions to kind of find out about that culture. What sort of questions can we ask that would help us to get an insight? Because I know I hear ask questions, and I'm just like, I don't know what kind of question I could ask that would give me the kind of insight I would need to be able to tell what the culture is.
Having lateral to several firms, I think this is a question, and I've asked this myself. How long have you been with the firm? And that will tell you a lot, because people who work, they tend to stay. And so when you hear people saying, I've been here my entire legal career, that's a good sign. When you hear people, they're like, well, I just got here a year ago. Well, they're still in the honeymoon phase. So that is my number one question to just kind of ask, which is, people don't pick up that you're trying to figure out a lot about the culture per se. And ask them, what is it like to work here? What is it like every day? Are you involved in firm committees? Again, people who like where they work, they want to be involved to help the success of the firm. So those are some of the questions that I can think of off the top of my head.
Okay.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. It's about longevity, and one of the things that once you get out here more and more, you'll realize, and Ricky said herself, that attorneys do lateral. So if you see someone that's been at a firm for quite some time, you understand that they're there for a reason. For me, and I would turn this back on to you, is what's important to you. Figure out what's important to you, what you want to realize when you ask those questions. For me, when I was a law student, diversity was 110% important. So I asked about diversity, specifically, even more so, I asked about African Americans after doing my research and taking a look on websites to see if there were partners and or senior associates within the firm. And then if the partner and or senior associate was either on a committee or over some type of partner committee as well. So that was important to me. That's something that I wanted to look at. And the reason being is because it shows me a blueprint. It shows me a roadmap that I can get into the partnership if I stay there for the duration of my time. So that was something that was important to me. But ultimately, determine what's important to you, and then articulate those into questions to make sure that it's a good fit.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Martin. Deshawn.
Hi, good evening. I'm Deshonda, and I know you guys both talked about the hiring process for like internships in the summer. So I guess my question is, what are some of the biggest don'ts you have seen for as like the interview process? Because I know the interview process is going to be highly competitive.
Some don'ts during interviews.
Yes.
Don't get too comfortable. So I've heard a lot of things slip out of people's mouths. Become professional. Be very professional in your approach. Also, I would recommend, this is a personal pet peeve of mine, of asking about day-to-day, because it's too hard to answer for attorneys, and it doesn't actually teach you anything. I know the thought process behind it is, oh, I maybe get to get a glimpse of what my day-to-day life would be. But our days change so much that I don't think that would be helpful, because what my day-to-day looks like as a senior associate versus what Ricky's as a partner versus what yours as a summer associate and or first year associate are going to be completely different. So that's one thing that I would say a don't for me personally is don't ask about the day-to-day, and then be very professional when you're sitting in these interviews. Don't get too comfortable. You can't get lulled to sleep, because there are some great interviewers out there that you start to feel very comfortable with. Don't fall into that pit.
Any don'ts for you, Ricky?
I think it's just don't show up ill prepared. I interview candidates sometimes, and I'm like, what do you know about the firm? And they're like, I don't know. I mean, you guys are at our school for OCI, and that's it. And it's kind of like a turnoff, and it seems as though, you just want a job, but you don't even care about your career enough to interview, or not interview, but research the certain firms that you're going to start your career at. And so I think it's just, don't show up ill prepared. And when you're sending thank you, I think you should always send a thank you email. Send a thank you email. I know that's a do and not a don't, but do send a thank you email.
To your point, some of the greatest thank yous that I received was after a summer associate was finished interviewing that half a day, they would go down in our lobby on our mezzanine, and they would hand write cards, bring it up to concierge, and then they would hand deliver those cards to each one of the attorneys that they interviewed with. And that actually speaks very highly of you. Emails are great, right? We're virtually right now, when a lot of us are not having in-person interviews. So that's perfect. But if you have that opportunity, it's just a cherry on top of your interview.
So I hand wrote my thank you email or letters back in the day, but I'm okay with an email at this point, Reggie. I don't want anthrax mail. It's COVID era here.
Yes.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Excuse me. And one tip to add on to that, while you're in the interview, ask your interviewers for their names, or look at the descriptor on the bottom of the screen to get their names. I will find that students sometimes reach out to me after their interviews and say, hey, can you tell me who I met with today? So I can send them a thank you email, and I have no idea because I wasn't in the interview. So don't make that mistake. Have a little notepad handy to just scribble down the person's name, ask the interviewer if it's okay for you to have their email address to send a thank you if you don't have it, or get the assistant who coordinated the interview, reach out to them so that you can follow up. Okay, and I think we have one. Oh, go ahead, Reggie.
I noticed probably try to stay away from Miss and Mr. and call the interviewer by their first name. It was very hard for me when I was interviewing, but when I would go back and ask for feedback, at least for people that I knew at the particular firm that I feedback, they would always tell me, to be careful for that. I didn't understand it. Now that I'm sitting on the other side and sitting in these hiring meetings, some people actually really have issues with being called Miss and Mr. or Mrs. So I would advise you all to address your interviewers by their first name.
Take the time to spell their names correctly. It just takes a little bit of research. It leaves a really poor impression. So I think, okay, we're running a little over time. I see 2 hands up. Do you all have a few more minutes to stay on the call?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So Christian Wolford, I have you next.
Yes, first I want to say thank you guys for doing this call. It means a lot to me. This is something I've always looked forward to doing, and this insight is very helpful. 2-part question, make it quick. I just wanted to know, since you guys have both tried to, or you guys both did some experience or had experience in professional world before actually going to law school, how did that weigh, or how does the employer looks at that? And more particularly for you, Ms. Ricky, when you started doing yours as far as business, how did that help you in the field that you're in right now?
So, as I mentioned before, I wanted to be a personal injury attorney, so I didn't even want to use my business degree at all. And so when I submitted my information to the 2 firms that I clerked at, they said, intern in. And I said, I don't know, labor and employment, right? Like the quote unquote help people. So I was in labor and employment, and they required you to split your time with another practice group. And so my mentor said, well, you have a undergraduate degree in business. What about the corporate group? I had no idea what a corporate lawyer did at all. And it was actually through the internship itself that, I picked my practice area. As far as my past work experience before I came to law school, it was definitely beneficial. I mean, some employers look at it and they say, if you have military experience, past work experience, they just think, this aligns with someone who is mature. There are just certain things that when you are transitioning from a school setting to a professional setting that, there's some immaturity there, and it's just a learning curve. So when you have some work experience in between, law school and undergrad, people tend to just say, okay, this is a mature person who has been in the workforce. But if you don't have it, nobody's gonna, not, give you an opportunity because of it.
Christian, tag on to that. I assume you have a business background.
Say it one more time.
You have a business background?
I do, finance and banking, and then I did a little bit of corporate work as well. So that's why I want to know if it held any kind of weight or anything like that.
Okay, the reason why I asked is because when we first introduced ourselves, I said I had a business background as well, specifically in marketing. And one thing that you'll realize in this profession is, in addition to being great at the legal work, you have to understand the business of your client. You have to also go out and market yourself to actually get clients and keep clients. And one of the things that was instilled in me by one of my sales professors was, before you can sell a product or a service, you have to sell yourself. You have to be personable, right? You have to demonstrate that you're knowledgeable, that you know what you're talking about, that they can lean on you for your counseling. So a lot of business principles do come in. I will say one of the things that shocked me is going from law school to this legal profession is the administrative side of things. There's so much that we don't touch on in law school that you have to figure out, whether it's billing, how to bill, how to negotiate. And these are some principles that I think you were exposed to with your business background that's going to help you when it comes out to setting yourself apart, specifically once you get to the area or the opportunity to start going out and chasing clients. Because I'll tell you, I think business first. So I think I'm different than most in my particular office and practice because of my business background and because of my 3+ years of experience in the business world. I always go at situations from a business aspect first and then the legal analysis to make that business principle align with the law if I can.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you so much for your input. I really appreciate it.
I thought I saw one more hand. I'm not sure.
I did,
Okay.
but I know we have to press for time, and it's fine. I can find out by connecting with one of our panelists on a separate basis, just for respect for time. It's okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much to all of our panelists and to our attendees. I think this has been one of our more helpful discussions to give a broad-based introduction and some guidance and wisdom into what it's like to work in a large law firm. So thank you to Ricky Thomas, Reggie Wilson, and Sonia Merrikh. And I thank you all for attending and have a great evening.
Thank you all for having us.
Bye. Thank you.
Best of luck this semester.
Thank you.
Thank you.